Hello and welcome everyone to this ET Markets webinar. I am Ami Shah from etmarkets.com. The current challenging times for the economies and businesses are the worst in our living memory as we navigate uncharted waters with no end in sight to this pandemic. Amid all this, the United States held its presidential election, and the war of words between US and China continued on the markets as well. In India, our military also dealt with borders permissions. With gradual easing of the lockdown, economic activity is picking up, but is still far from pre-COVID levels. Meanwhile, as India is still grappling with the first wave of the pandemic, certain parts of Europe have announced fresh lockdowns as they deal with a deadly second wave. Vaccines are making progress, but a foolproof elixir is not yet in sight. As an investor, how does one create wealth in these uncertain times? How do we navigate the markets amid this black swan event? To discuss this and more, we have with us the brightest minds in the industry. Our panelists actually need no introduction. Our first panelist is Mr. Nilesh Shah, Group President and MD of Kotak Mahindra Asset Management Company. He has over 25 years of experience in the capital markets and in his previous assignments, he has held leadership roles in ICICI Securities, ICICI Prudential Mutual Fund, Franklin Templeton, and Axis Capital. Welcome to the show, Nilesh Bhai. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, Ami.
Our next panelist is Mr. Samit Vartak. Samit is the founding partner and CIO of Sage One Investment Advisors. Samit has been investing in equity markets since 1999 and has experienced and studied many bull and bear cycles. Samit has also spent around a decade in the US working with Gap, PwC Consulting, Deloitte, and Ernst & Young. Welcome to the webinar, Samit. Looking forward to an enriching discussion.
Thank you so much, Ami. Pleasure to be here.
Kickstarting with the questions to Nilesh Bhai, I think the pandemic and the lockdown tried every asset manager's patience. What was the one investment mantra that you stuck to amid these uncertain times, and how did it reward you?
So
Nilesh Bhai.
over last 25 years, we have learned that discipline always pays. In the month of Jan 20, markets were doing well. We didn't lose our discipline at that point of time. In the month of March 20, things were looking very bad. Again, we didn't lose our discipline then. And today in November, things are looking reasonably better. Again, we are following our investment process. Anchoring investment to a process, anchoring investment to a decision has always been rewarding. In the short term, it does create some amount of pain, but over a longer period of time, that discipline, that encourage allows you to generate better return.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Samit, you were one of the few who got things completely right. You offloaded around 20% of your holdings weeks before the lockdown. What prompted you to take this decision? Also, you wrote to your investors around March 25 that it was a good time to deploy funds. That was some fantastic foresight. What went into taking these calls?
Sure. No, so just a disclaimer that I would not recommend anyone trying to time the market. I also do not time the market. This was one of the rarest events when I decided to do it. See, I use a framework, as Nilesh was mentioning. You have to follow your process, right? For markets, most of the time the market is too intelligent enough to let you take timing and make alpha out of timing. I use a framework where it's about the risks and what are the implications of the risk, right? So what was during pre-COVID level, I thought there was completely unknown risk because COVID was something which just came out of the blue and people were not aware of what the implications were, right? So COVID was unknown, as well as what would be the implications on the economy of COVID was unknown. So two unknown unknowns, which is generally, if you are well ahead of the market, generally it works out the timing gives you big benefit, right? And that's what I was able to do. Even if I was like a week late, there was no point, because then the market caught up with the risks as well as the implications of it. By 25th of March, we understood what COVID was. I mean, it was all over the media, it was all over the world, as well as lockdown started to be implemented. So we also understood what would happen to the economy because of the lockdown, because no one thought that world could completely go into lockdown, entire countries would be locked down. That was a completely new risk that came out. By 25th, everyone knew the risk from COVID as well as the risk from the lockdown. So it became a known. And that's when I said, now the market is completely pricing in the risk from the COVID playing out. And that's what I said, that now there is no point in, it's time to deploy. And that's the only way I was able to take a call and push the investors to invest at that point in time. But this is, again, a lot of luck, because getting those ideas at the right time and implementing that is not easy. And it is one of the rarest times that I would say, 1 in 100 times that, you get it right. So I would definitely not recommend anyone trying to do it.
Well, thanks, Samit, for those. Meanwhile, to our audience, you can send in your questions in the Q&A bar at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to send in your questions. We'll try and take as many as we can. Coming to lockdown, the decision of lockdown, the argument seems to have narrowed down between lives and livelihood. I was speaking to the economist Jim O'Neill, who slammed the whole idea of lockdown and said the world really cannot afford to have these kind of lockdowns. What are your thoughts, Samit? Lives or livelihood? What should take precedence?
Yeah, I mean, see, lives absolutely. For you can't compromise with lives. But in this material world where everything is linked to livelihoods, it's not necessary. Just if you completely let go of prioritizing livelihood, it does impact lives. And we have seen. I mean, it could be in terms of suicides, or it could be just the financial implications are so high that it can take the entire families into depression. And we have seen that across multiple businesses, but no one really tracks what happens to the lives because of this, because the priority is always to whatever is upfront, which is COVID, and what are the implications of lives on because of COVID. And hence I would, of course, each country will have to take its own decision. The mortality rate across different nations is completely different. The spread, the severity of this is very, very different. But neither of the two can be ignored. Livelihood is extremely important, and there has to be a balance between the two.
Nilesh bhai, what are your thoughts? I mean, we saw the plight of the lesser privileged, who were probably the worst hit in the entire thing. Do you think we can afford lockdowns? Do you think countries can really shut themselves down again to save lives, or how does a nation navigate this situation?
It's always a tough choice, but lives once lost can never be recovered back. Livelihood once lost can always be recovered back. And hence, if you have no choice but to choose one, life should always get preference over livelihood. Now, lockdown can be implemented in various formats. There could be selective lockdowns, there could be severe lockdowns, and everyone wants to blame the government. But what about people? We have seen in countries like South Korea and Japan and Taiwan, where people pursued path of public and private hygiene, where they maintained social distancing, and where they were wearing masks. Without lockdown, they were in a position to control COVID-19. So as much as it is the responsibility of the government, it is also the responsibility of the civil society to fight this COVID-19. If civil society cooperates and shares the burden, we I believe we will be able to protect lives as well as livelihoods together.
Also, as we speak, of course, the latest numbers show that it looks like the blue wave is sweeping the US, and we may see Joe Biden in the White House. Markets for now have been euphoric, but we do know that Biden is planning to raise taxes. So, what would this mean for the world markets? Nilesh, by your thoughts?
So if you see the commentary, it's kind of yo-yo. First market went down anticipating Biden victory and potential tax rise. Then it went up anticipating Trump victory. Then it went up anticipating Biden victory. So it is more of buying on rumors and selling on news kind of function. I think what US markets are pricing in is a fiscal stimulus which can only come after the elections are behind them. And in anticipation of that stimulus, they are probably keeping their markets at a higher level. What we have to focus upon is our market. Undoubtedly, in the short term, there will be correlation between Indian market and US market. However, if we improve our economy, if we take advantage of COVID-19 crisis and convert it into growth changing opportunity, our markets will do well irrespective of what happens in US and US election.
Thanks for those thoughts. Samit, as someone who has lived in the US for a long time before and now as an asset manager, who were you rooting for? And are you happy with the way the election results are shaping up?
Right. I mean, see, I was completely neutral. I think in the long run, at least for the rest of the world, it's not going to make much of a difference. But the stock market definitely hates uncertainty, and with Donald Trump, in the pilot seat in the US, of course, he's going to think, more from a US centric point of view. So all the steps that probably he has taken, has benefited the US for sure. I mean, you can see pre-COVID what kind of economy they were running, what kind of unemployment rates they were running. I think with Biden in place, that uncertainty is going to be much lesser, and at the same time, it is not going to be completely, US centric. The policies will be more of globalization, which was pre-Donald Trump. And generally, globalization should benefit rest of the world, more compared to the last four years. So from that perspective, I think it's a good thing, even for the US, that they have a democratic. I mean, assuming that the indications are right and there is a democratic president, but the Senate seems to be kept by the Republicans. So it's a good balance. It's always good that no one then goes towards extreme steps of too much stimulus and then no one caring about the balance sheet. So I feel the outcome is a good middle path, plus less disruptive for the rest of the world, and hence the markets won't be as skewed as in the last 4 years where the US markets outperformed everyone. I think it's time for the rest of the world to catch up and make up for the lost ground over the last 4 years.
Sure. Amid all this current situation, of course, we are reaching some closure with regards to US elections, but there is no end in sight to the pandemic. Amid all this, which pockets in the market attract you at this point, Samit, and why? Where is it that you see value, and which pockets do you think have potential to, give good returns from here on?
Right. See, I think once, so COVID is a pretty well-known risk, so it is going to continue, and people are ready for it. Even if it lasts for the next 1 year, I think most businesses and people, investors are pretty prepared for it, and that's where even with the COVID situation, I think people underestimate the resilience of economies. Just look at what's happening even in India, where we probably had the least amount of stimulus, and the severest of lockdown, and then look at this quarter. I mean, so far the results which have come out, the non-financials, even if you consider the profit before tax is up 18% on an average compared to last September quarter, and it is mainly not because of the top line going up, but the profitability of companies have gone up. So the companies have been able to cut costs. So I won't be that much worried about the COVID, because the economies are resilient. People bounce back, people adjust, and that is going to happen across the world, right? The pockets that I like, I think you got to consider what are the issues that our country is facing. Like the biggest problem in the next decade that we will face is employment. So the government focus is going to be towards creating employment, and you could see the steps which the government has been taking. Whether it's the incentives for contract manufacturing in pharma APIs or bulk drugs, or the defense equipment, or in the electronics. So I think that's an area which is going to do well over the next decade. The chemical space, again, it's again part of, I would say, the export oriented or the contract manufacturing space. So either it could be manufacturing for the world or substituting for the domestic economy. I think that space is extremely important. And the next space I would be very, very keen, and I think it's going to be very attractive, is the building material, because the government has given at least the next 3 years for setting up a new manufacturing facility at a much lower attractive tax rate, plus these incentive schemes that you are coming up with. So there will be a lot of infrastructure which will be built. There will be a lot of factories which will be built, and building materials will be required. I mean, you could see the numbers in whether it's tiles or steel pipes, or steel structural pipes, cement, generic steel, electrical wires, across the board. The building materials have done well, and I think if the government is even decently successful at implementing the schemes and grabbing the opportunity which lies ahead of us, these sectors should do well. Another sector that I would be very positive on would be anything to do with entertainment, because people are waiting to go out for vacation. People are waiting to go out for entertainment. And at the same time, people want communication. So building any ancillary place which will be geared towards building the communication network, I think will be extremely doing well. From an investor perspective, you cannot directly go for direct plays. You find opportunities where there are ancillary plays. Where it's very difficult for people to connect the dots. That's where you find the opportunity. So considering this as sort of the background, if you look at maybe secondary or tertiary opportunities, that's where you will find the biggest bargain, and that's, I think, where the opportunity is for investors.
Great. Thanks, Amit. Nilesh bhai, where are you hunting for bargains right now? Where do you think there is good value to be picked up?
So, as of today, we are looking at companies on a bottom-up basis. We believe companies which have good balance sheet, they will be able to survive the downturn and benefit from the upturn. So lesser leverage company, moderately leveraged companies with strong balance sheets is one characteristics which we are looking at. The second is cost cutting. Clearly, companies which are able to cut costs in this downturn will be fighting fit when the upturn arrives. The third segment or third characteristics is about companies which are adaptive. There is a wave of disruption coming. It got fast-tracked courtesy COVID-19. And if companies are not able to adopt themselves, they are going to become like dinosaur extinct. So right now, in all our portfolios, existing as well as new entry, we are evaluating every business on whether it's leveraged or not, whether it has intense cost cutting or not, and whether it's adaptive or not. If these three criteria are met, then we can look at investment in those companies.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Um, Samit, you actually liquidated a significant portion of your holdings at some point, and is it is sticking to relatively more cash than before a better bet in such time for an average investor, so to say?
Right. No, I mean, as I said, today, whatever risks that anyone is foreseeing are pretty well-known risks. The risks that people think of today are maybe COVID, the impact of lockdown, second wave, third wave, whatever. I mean, all those waves can continue. At the same time, the balance sheet expansion, over leveraging of economies, all of those risks are pretty well known, and markets are pretty smart. Those things generally do not play out in terms of a big crash. And I would say, only if you expect a crash, that is when you should even think about going for some kind of a cash call. You can't go for a cash call thinking that the market is going to go down by 5, 10, 15%. That 5, 10, 15% is just a normal movement in any given year for the market, right? So see, the crash, if it happens, will be from a risk which is not known to the market today, and it is very difficult for you to predict that unknown risk, right? So once the unknown risk emerges, and if you are well ahead of other investors, only then you can maybe think of going for a cash call. Otherwise, most often you will get it exactly wrong, because most investors tend to take the cash call when everyone around them are so worried, and then that the fear around you creates fear inside you, and generally that's the exactly wrong time when you end up taking the cash call.
Sure. Also, Samit, with this work from home and lockdown, there was this huge spike in first time investors, the so called Robinhood investors who entered the market for the first time. And most of these belong to Generation Z. So, when I speak about investments to 20, 25-year-olds around me, it is all about stocks and IPOs. No mutual funds, no FDs or anything. It is sort of ingrained in them that stock prices always go up. What is your one piece of advice to them? They've all tasted their first bit of success and looking forward to deploy more funds, but what is your one piece of advice to them?
Right. So I will go with my experience. When I started investing, I was in the US in 1999. That was the boom time. That was the dot-com boom. So wherever you put money, you made money. And generally, that's where you do not learn at all, because in making money in investment is so easy that you think whatever you're doing is right. So your learnings are generally wrong. So an investor needs to be very aware of this phenomenon, that it is because of pure luck that the entire market is going up. And you, fortunately for everyone, when they started working from home, it was the bottom of the market, and from that point it's been just a one way street, right? So main thing for an investor which really adds value over a long period of time is to study the mistakes which others have made, because whenever things are good, generally you do not want to study anything, because it doesn't force you, because things are so happy go lucky that you tend to do the same kind of thing. The markets are today very, very efficient. What's happening with a lot of young investors today is that many investors know which are the companies which are going to do well, right? And then analysts are also so communicative. There are WhatsApp groups, so things spread very, very quickly, and it's very easy for anyone to fall for that trap, thinking that the earnings are going to be great, so let's take a position. But generally, in such cases, everyone knows about it, and you are late in the market. When the tide turns, that's when you will feel the brunt of this. And that's what happened for me in 1999, when the tide turned in 2000, when things started going down. I used to invest based on what I hear in the market, and which everyone else is also hearing. And when things are going down, you have no conviction in any of the stocks that you hold, right? Because you have taken a decision based on what someone else has told you. So I would tell the new investors, do not go with the convictions of others, study every company that you hold yourself, build your own conviction. It may, maybe compromise on the returns right now, but I'm telling you, you will save a lot of money which you have made. Important thing in the market is whatever money that you make during lucky times, how much of that you retain during a unlucky or the downtrain, and focus on protecting that money that you have made during lucky time, and that can only be made by understanding what you're invested in.
Thank you, Samit. Nilesh bhai, as a market veteran, what would you advise these young investors? You have this get rich quick attitude.
Well, if making money was so easy, all of us would have become billionaire. Making money is tough. It's not possible by overnight success. Most of the billionaires have created their wealth over the years by working hard. There's no shortcut to success.
Sure. Also, Nilesh bhai, do you think the way they have flocked to stocks, they will eventually come by and invest in mutual funds as actively as well? Are you already witnessing a surge in first-time investors in mutual funds as well?
So, in terms of flows, equity mutual funds are actually seeing redemptions. In terms of new investors, there are new investors coming to mutual fund, but compared to people who are opening demat account, the number of people who are investing in mutual fund is far less.
Right. Right.
So undoubtedly right now, a lot of people are moving towards direct equity investment. I'm sure over a period of time, they will also appreciate the value a mutual fund can bring, and they will become mutual fund investor also.
Sure. Thank you. Also, Samit, Indians' love for gold seems to have paid off well in recent times. It is probably a grandma's "I told you so" moment, uh, with gold prices ruling where they are. At the same time, the less understood bitcoins also fared very well this year. What are your thoughts on these asset classes, bullion and cryptocurrency?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, see, I probably am not the right person because I am completely equity investor. I only invest in, Indian stocks. I do not diversify. Maybe it's not the right thing, but I think one risk that everyone should be aware of, because the globe is going for stimulus. There is huge money printing which is going on. So there is a race towards depreciating currencies across the world. People want weaker currencies, and that is something can destroy your wealth in, whether it in real terms, because you may, if the rupee depreciates from 75 to 100, and even if the market goes up by 25% or 30%, in real terms actually didn't really make money. So to protect and protect yourself from the currency risk, I think gold, I really do not have much idea about the Bitcoin, but gold is something where everyone can invest very, very easily, and with the kind of money printing, it could give you that protection.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Nilesh, my credit funds have been going through a tough time since the IL&FS crisis, and earlier this year we also saw Franklin Templeton shutting down some of its schemes. Do you think the worst is over for credit funds? And do you think it is the right time to invest, put in money in credit funds?
So it depends upon the definition of worst. If you believe worst means there will be delay or default in credit risk fund, the answer is it's not going to get over. When you go to play cricket, you can't expect only half volleys. A bouncer will come. So in credit risk portfolio, when you are trying to generate additional return by taking credit risk, delays and defaults will occur. Now, if we see over last 3 years credit risk fund, they still have delivered somewhere around 7 to 8% return. Of course, there were periods where the NAVs came down, but then subsequently they recovered as recoveries happen. If you are a 3-year investor, if you can take 1 or 2 blows of credit event, then you should invest in credit risk fund right now. But be prepared for credit events. They are going to be there in the credit risk fund.
Sure. Okay. Also, Nilesh, by talking about generation gap and our thought processes towards investing. Um, so, for example, when I talk to my dad about investment strategies, a lot of it touches upon safety of capital and a relatively conservative approach. How do you think the thought process has changed within your family? How different are the thoughts on investing of your parents and you, and now your children in terms of investing pattern?
So, unfortunately, I don't have a father, and my mother is not financially savvy. But if you say that all older generation people are conservative, that's not a right statement. I meet 70, 75, 80-year-old people who have more knowledge on equity market than I have. They are kind of semi-retired, but I'm amazed at their knowledge. At the same time, I have also met 25-year-old kid who is far more conservative than the 75-year-old uncle I would have met in the morning. So it is not related to age, it is
Right.
related to mindset. And having safety of capital is not wrong at all. If you hear Warren Buffett, he says follow 2 rules to make money. Rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. Now, someone like Warren Buffett has become the richest investor in the world by following conservatism, by following safety of capital. So there is nothing wrong in asking for protection of capital. There are many fund managers who have said that you become successful by not making mistakes rather than by investing into winners. Avoiding mistake itself is as important as finding a winner. Finally, in cricket analogy, when you get half volley and you settle for defensive shot, that's not conservatism, that's stupidity. And if you get a Yorker and you hit that ball for a 6, now some batsmen can achieve that, but otherwise, by and large, that's stupidity. So play the ball on its merit. If it's half volley, swing the bat. In all likelihood, you will get 4 or 6. Sometimes you will get out even on a half volley, bad luck. On a Yorker, try to defend your wicket unless until asking rate is very high. By and large, you will save your wicket and live for another half volley to hit out of stadium.
Sure, sure. Thank you. Thank you for those thoughts. Samit, how different is your investment philosophy, wealth building philosophy compared with your parents, and how do you see it shaping up with your next generation? Have your decisions been bolder, riskier than your parents?
Sure. No, I mean, unfortunately for my father is a farmer, and for him, I think he has spent almost his entire life under debt. So really never had any surplus money. He's never invested in his life, not even in FDs. So, yeah, for him, I think there is not much to lose, right? So, if you don't have much to lose, then you are a risk taker, and that's how generally his life has been. Whereas for me, because my first investment experience in the dot-com boom itself, where I lost all my money that I earned initially, and it was very, very painful for me because I knew that money, if I had given it, would have been so much useful for my father, and given his situation. But so that had a very profound impact on my journey. I mean, I completely stopped investing after 2000, and then I really started. I had done MBA and MBA in finance. I thought I learned zero during that time, and that's when I really started learning by reading books, by reading mistakes of other investors. Enrolled myself for the CFA, and completed that. And the next 3 years is when I really learned about investments and the conservatism, because it's not, as Nilesh was saying, it's not necessary that if you're conservative, you will make less money. Protecting money itself is very, very important. But more importantly, I think for an investor, it's important for, especially I'm talking about, the average who is not a full-time investor. It's important to know, what your strengths are. In a cricket analogy, it's like if you need to know whether you are good at cricket or not. Maybe you are good at, kho-kho or kabaddi somewhere else. So it's better to focus on that. If you are really good at cricket, then focus on cricket, and that's what one needs to know, whether investment is something which fits your strengths, your temperament, and whether you really enjoy it or not. Otherwise, it can make your life very, very stressful. So from that perspective, in terms of risk, I don't think this generation, if you have gone through a couple of cycles, are that risk taker. For most of our previous generation, they never really had much of surplus money to invest in. Probably our generation is where people have made a lot of money, and that's where the risk starts. I don't know about the next generation. I think the next generation, because they never really have faced, at least for the middle class or the upper middle class, those kids haven't really seen tough times monetarily. So I'm not sure how important risk is, because maybe they will have to experience their own failures and losing money to build their own, because I think it's a personal experience. It's probably not about generation. And I'm pretty sure that the sector of the economy where they are probably not so well to do right now, though those are the ones who will have the right hunger and the right attitude to make a lot of money, and they will have more money to to invest. So it's about, I think, personal journey. Each one will have to have his own path and build his own path.
Going ahead, what is going to be the new normal for the investing world and our lives in general? What has this pandemic changed permanently for you as an individual and a professional?
Sure. I struggled because in a lot of even in our friends circles, we have discussed this kind of a topic. My view is that the world is pretty resilient. Things bounce back pretty much quickly. People adjust and bounce back to pretty normal. I mean, you've seen in the 1920s this Spanish flu, and just 2 or 3 years down the line, you were in a great bull market where people were again taking risks. So I think people move on. Same thing will happen even now. When you are living through it, it seems very, very serious. You think you'll do this and that. Never really happens. At least in terms of investment, I don't think anything is going to change. Businesses will evolve. They're also pretty resilient. As an investor, it's just that you need to be on the lookout for the next great businesses. Again, it's a completely bottoms-up story. There would be certain sectors which may have disruptions, which they may find it very difficult to continue at the same profitability. So important that you identify those sectors which may be permanently impacted because of the change in some lifestyle that is there, and then identify the upcoming sectors. But it is normal part of life. It's just that because the situation is pretty severe right now, you may think about it, but that's, I think, a continuous process that investors have to keep in mind. Especially in India, businesses get disrupted, and you cannot just buy and forget. You have to evaluate each business model for every point in time. You never know when things are going to change for that business model, and make sure that you identify the newer great businesses for the future, because investment is all about identifying great businesses for the future in any circumstances.
Thanks, Amit. Nilesh bhai, since March, most of us have been cooped up at home, and a lot of us revisited our priorities, be it investments, be it personal life, be it our expenditures. What has changed for you permanently as an individual, at a family level? as an investment professional, are there any permanent changes that this pandemic has brought to you?
So one change which this pandemic has shown is the vulnerability. Being fund manager, we almost take things for granted. But this crisis showed how vulnerable we are as individual, as society, as country. And I think one learning from this pandemic is that you better become appreciative of others' effort. You never know what life has in store tomorrow. So might as well start appreciating people today than wait for tomorrow. So if I can become a better appreciator of people who are around me, I think that will be the biggest learning of this pandemic.
Well, that's a wonderful thought, and I agree with you completely on that. But I think we appreciate things much more in life now than before. Also, hypothetically, if you had to allocate 10 lakh rupees of 10 lakh rupees of personal wealth right now between asset classes or sectors, what would the allocation look like? Nilesh
So
bhai?
I mean, everyone's risk profile is different. So if I'm a conservative investor, I will be equal weight equity at this point of time. Markets are not as cheap as they were in March 20. So this is time to be equal weight.
Mhm.
Second, I think gold will do well as an asset class. It does well in an era of low interest rates and high liquidity. However, do remember that in India, gold has 12.5% import duty. If tomorrow import duty comes down to zero for whatever reason, rupee gold prices will be down 12.5% overnight. You need to take that while investing in gold. Subject to that risk, I will be overweight gold as an asset class. On real estate, commercial real estate, I will be underweight. There is likelihood of more supply in commercial real estate through vacancies by large companies which prefer work from home model. On the other hand, as the need for staying near your office in large metros start coming down due to work from home, maybe the tier 2 towns will see expansion in residential properties. Instead of having 2-bedroom hall kitchen, people may prefer 3-bedroom hall kitchen, keeping one room extra for their work from home environment. So I will be underweight commercial real estate, but I will be overweight residential real estate, especially towards the affordable variety,
Right.
more in the second tier town than in large urban cities. On the fixed income side, if I want to take risk in fixed income, credit risk fund will be appropriate. Spreads are wider, returns are attractive, but there is a risk. If I don't want to take credit risk in my fixed income investments, then I will go for longer duration. I still believe India has potential of lowering policy rates, and there is a good chance that market yields can come down as inflation starts easing off. So in summary, equal weight equity, overweight gold, underweight commercial real estate, overweight tier 2 town residential real estate, more in affordable variety, and overweight credit risk or duration depending upon what is your suitability.
Great. Thank you. That was indeed very insightful. Samit, how would your allocation of rupees 10 lakh of personal wealth that look like at this point of time?
So again, for me, being completely focusing on equities, asset allocation is not my expertise. My expertise is equity, so I allocate my entire wealth into Indian equities. So I mean, in terms of that, I already spoke about few of the sectors that I am bullish about. So those could be, but I absolutely have no idea about, because as Nilesh said, the risk profile of individual investors is so different. And given that I'm not the expert, I'm nowhere in place to advise them on the overall asset allocation.
Right, right, right. Fair enough. Well, thank you. And we now have we'll take some questions from our viewers. One of the questions that I have here is from an anonymous attendee who is asking, what was the first action that you took as an investor the same day as the lockdown was announced? Samit.
Okay. No, so again, my first step was basically now, because that was a big uncertainty, whether there will be a lockdown or whether there will. What is the step that the government is going to take to basically restrict the spread of COVID? And that was an extremely concrete step that the government took. So for me, even though it was a step which was going to affect the economy, but it is basically containing the risk of COVID. So for me, it was a positive development, and that's the day where I decided that whatever cash that we had generated, and we're lucky to generate that cash, we said it's time to redeploy that cash into the market.
Nilesh bhai, what was your first thought as an asset manager when lockdown was announced?
We didn't take any action on our portfolio. We were comfortable sitting with the companies in which we had invested. Yes, we did connect with our portfolio companies to find out how is their business going to get impacted by the lockdown. And once we got the comfort that many of them are planning to continue their business in one form or other, we found that there's no need to take any action on the portfolio.
Sure. One of the questions we have from Mr. K.U. Rajmera is it the right time to buy equities, or should one wait for some correction to come in? If you could help, Nilesh bhai.
So when you have money, Keyur bhai, that is the best time to buy equity. Now,
That's
will there be correction? Well, I haven't met anyone who has seen future. There's no person who can predict what's going to happen in market tomorrow.
Sure.
When you enter into boxing ring, you go with the mindset ki ek do lagegi. When you invest in equity, you have to go with the mindset ki thoda bhav niche jayega. So you must invest depending upon your ability to take the downside. Even at 7,800 Nifty in March, it went down to 7,500 first before it came to 12,000. So there will be always some downside, some volatility in equity market. No one will be in a position to time it. Right. If you are a long-term investor, price going down has no impact on your portfolio. If you are a trader, then yes, it's a different ball game. But I presume you are asking as an investor, when you have money, that's the best time to invest in equity.
Great. Thank you. The next question is for Samit from one Mr. Siddharth Nayak. How do we know we are not entering into value, not getting caught into value traps in equity, say the likes of ITC or Coal India, and not lose wealth over time in the process?
Right. I mean, see, again, everyone has their own style of investments. Some investors do look for cigar butt kind of investments, where you're looking for finding stocks which are valued 50 cents to $1, or those. My investment style is about growth. You are in India, where growth is one of the best things which is offered to an investor. And growth is about earnings growth going forward. What earnings growth gives you is, I think it's one of the biggest defensive factor in investments, because it is easy to go wrong in valuation, but if the growth comes through, you might not make money for a year, but generally in the long run, whatever is the earnings growth is the returns that you end up making. It is not easy, as Nilesh said, investment is not easy. I can say I'm looking for growth, but again, to understand whether the business will deliver growth, you have to do in-depth study about that business. You have to go on ground, talk to the supply chain, talk to the management, visit factories, and look at the competition. It's very important to know how the company is positioned against the rest of the competition, because growth, you can't just rely growth based on the economy or the industry. You need to bet on companies which will grow irrespective of how the economy is. I mean, there are many companies in the last 4 years in a stagnant economy who have doubled their earnings or tripled their earnings in the worst of, I think, economic phase that we have gone through. So you can only identify such companies by doing in-depth study about those businesses. So, and I mean, if you're investing in 20 companies, I'm pretty sure there will be 2 or 3, 4 which will be value traps. You realize that, but more important is that as soon as you realize that your hypothesis is not working out, just get out, irrespective of whether you are 20% down, 40% down, 80% down. Just get out. There are many other lucrative opportunities to move on to. It's important that you move on to great businesses rather than great cheap value, because cheap value, you don't know whether it's going to be unlocked during your investment horizon. So it's better to bet on great businesses than just cheap value.
Sure. Samit, the next question is again for you from one Mr. Sriram Rajshekharan. So, how do you identify multi-baggers during uncertain times as these, when these tentative multi-baggers are also going through dips? Is there a formula? Is there a how do you identify it?
Right. So, see, what I call multi-bagger is, it gives you 10x in 10 years kind of a return. That is like 26% kind of an annualized return is sort of a multi-bagger, right? So for that, the core ingredient is the earnings growth, right? And so basically you're saying that earnings should double over the next 3 years. It's not that easy, so you have to look for companies which is going to double their earnings in the next 3 to 4 years, right? If you are lucky and if you get it at a bargain price, you get returns from the earnings growth as well as from the re-rating of the multiple. Typically in any cycle, I mean, see, investment is, you can never time it, but Indian markets do go through cycles, right? I mean, especially for the space in which I invest in, which is generally going to be mid cap and small caps, because that's the only space where I can get earnings which are doubling in the next 3 years or 4 years. Large caps, it's going to be extremely difficult. Their time horizon is probably 6 to 7 years is when they are able to double their earnings. So almost double the time that they take. Right? But if you look at India's last couple of decades for the small cap or the mid cap indices, in every cycle, the small cap index has gone up by at least 4x from the bottom to the top. But again, you have to be very lucky to enter at the bottom and get out at the top. So the only way you can at least protect yourself from, even if you get at the top, and protecting yourself from not losing money, is if you're betting on companies where the earnings will come through. You can go wrong in valuation, because valuation is all about timing, and valuations has a huge range, right? Because in the small cap space, the range of valuation is from 10 times to 30 times.
Right.
Today, we are somewhere at 17 or 18 times for the small cap space, the median valuation. So at least the valuation is in your favor. If you enter the markets at 30 times valuation, and even if the earnings double in the next 3 years and the valuation falls to 15 times, the P derating eats up your earnings growth. But at least you don't lose money. Otherwise, if you are trapped into companies which are not growing their earnings, and then 30 times become 15 times, you lost 50% of your wealth. So the only way to find multi-baggers, key ingredient, earnings growth, for that in-depth study of that business, and then that business being able to take away market share from others, because even if the industry is not growing, that company ends up growing. Any company which has done that over the last 3-4 years have done it majorly because they have been able to take away market share from the rest of the competition. And for that, understanding the business as well as the competition is very, very important. There is no easy way out from that.
Sure. Thanks, Amit. That was insightful. Nilesh, the next question is for you from Mr. Prem Shroff. What should senior citizens keep in mind while investing?
So, Prem bhai, you need to be aware why you are investing. One set of senior citizens are investing so that they can get regular income in their retirement. One set of senior citizens might be investing because they want to leave inheritance to their kids. Now, in both cases, your investment objectives are totally different and your risk profile is totally different.
Right.
When you are looking at regular income, you need to be aware that if you move towards very safe instruments, you may underperform inflation. And that is actually a loss over a period of time. In mid-90s, many bankers took VRS, and in those days, ICICI, IFCI, IDBI bonds were giving 16-17% return.
Right.
They all invested their surplus money there, hoping that now we can live peacefully in retirement. In 2003, by the time first call option came on those bonds, interest rates had declined to 7-8%.
Right.
In just about 7 years, their entire bond portfolio got repriced. And many of them had to restart their life by working after retiring at a senior level in a bank. So keep in mind that your regular income is taken care by investing in such portfolio where you don't take additional extra risk, but at the same time, you don't make it totally safe.
Right.
My recommendation is that divide your portfolio in two parts. One, which is invested into safer schemes like company fixed deposit, good quality company fixed deposits, high interest bearing, good quality debentures when they are coming out with IPOs, debt mutual funds, and so on and so forth. The other part should be invested into funds like balance advantage fund or asset allocation fund, where fund managers decide how much to invest in equity depending upon valuation of the market. This fund's volatility will be little above fixed income, and over a cycle, not every month, every quarter, every year, but over a cycle, this funds will deliver equity minus return. So you will have safety for your regular income and some portfolio and risk, which will give you protection against inflation. On the other hand, if you are that lucky senior citizen whose day-to-day requirement is taken care by their next generation, and you want to live inheritance for your grandkids, then certainly you can take higher risk by investing in equities, real estate, gold kind of risky assets. And hopefully over a period of time, that will create a fortune which your kids will be thankful to you.
There are plenty of questions coming our way, but we have time for just one as we draw close to the session. Nilesh bhai, there is this question from one Mr. Ascharya Bansal. What is the one thumb rule for long-term wealth creation?
So, Ami, there is only one thumb rule, and that is about discipline, discipline, discipline. Either you should be lucky to make money, or you should be disciplined to make money. And let me give you this by way of example on mythology. So before Mahabharat war was going to begin, Krishna Bhagwan goes to Kaurav camp and tries to convince Duryodhan to not fight the war. He convinces them on merit, on logic, on rationality, on unavoidable losses, but Duryodhan doesn't agree. Finally, Duryodhan says one thing to Lord Krishna, Janami dharmam, nachme pravrutti. Janami adharmam, nachme nivrutti. Oh, great Krishna, please don't tell me what is right. I know exactly what is right, but I can't follow it.
Right.
And don't preach me what is wrong. I exactly know what is wrong, but I can't resist from it. So in each one of us, there is Duryodhan. In our physical health, all of us have been told that eating junk food, drinking cola is bad for health. But whenever we get an opportunity, we end up eating junk food at the cost of our health.
Yeah.
Similarly, in financial investment, everyone knows that discipline is necessary, long-term investment is necessary, regular investment is necessary, asset allocation is critical. But we get swayed by the momentum. We start investing in stock market when our neighbor has made money.
Right.
We start moving out of stock market when prices have corrected. So as long as you can control your Duryodhan, as long as you can follow the path of discipline, you will end up creating wealth.
Great. Great. No, that analogy was very interesting indeed. Uh, Samit, the same question to you. What is the one thumb rule for long-term wealth creation?
I can't put it in better words than what Nilesh has has done. Discipline, 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 and hard work. Discipline is what not to do, but there also has to be to do. So if you don't have the time to go in depth in companies, better outsource that activity to someone else because it's a full-time work. You cannot just superficially look at companies in India and deploy a large sum of your wealth. It's not worth taking that risk. Identify a good fund manager who is ethical and who has delivered and will not make mistakes for you, even if he doesn't make super normal wealth, but he's not going to lose too much money for you. Identify that, and if you're good at investing and if you can do the hard work, I think it's enjoyable, it's fun. So
Great. This has been a very enriching discussion for sure. Thank you so much, Nilesh Bhai. Thank you so much, Samit, for coming over for this webinar. And thank you, audience, for the wonderful questions. Those are very insightful questions indeed. Thank you for thank you for watching this webinar. Thank you, everyone. That's it from us at etmarkets.com. Do log on to ET Markets for news, views, and more such events. Thank you so much.